I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I agree with the Democrats. Energy is a very important issue. It's so important that we can't let ideological dogmatism dominate it. And the majority leader was correct when he said wind is awfully cheap right now. It certainly is. That's a wonderful thing we can be proud of as Minnesotans. But since 1990, we have lower carbon emissions now than we did in 1990. We're trending in the right direction. We're trending in the direction that you'd all like to see. And that's not because of mandates. That's not because of wind and solar, although it is partially. The main driver in lower carbon emissions is our conversion to natural gas. The biggest decline started when the shale revolution started in North Dakota. And natural gas, instead of becoming a precious, precious commodity, became a waste product when we produced oil. We are so blessed to live in a country where we have a waste product that can heat our homes during the polar vortex. That is not something the rest of the world can say. Look at the energy costs of Europe. They're over 10 times the amount, and they're only going up. They're restarting coal plants. They're going backwards, and they already do this kind of policy that you're suggesting, ramming renewable energy through a mandate that's pushed too early. We're trending in the right direction. We all want cleaner air, cleaner water, and we understand that energy is a huge factor in that. But this bill is just like what they do in California, where they have blackouts. That's why we're calling it the Blackout Bill, because right now we're in a decent shape, but our grid is not even good at the moment. We've been warned repeatedly that we could be in a blackout scenario already at peak times. And in California, a blackout means you go spend a day at the beach. In Minnesota, a blackout means you could die. Even in Texas, when they lost power, even in balmy Texas, it still was dangerous and dozens of people died. This is not something we can just talk to our ideological base, talk to the Looney Tunes, and then take their policies to a sacred institution like this and decide that it's the right thing for our state. We actually agree that we want cleaner air. We're for building out clean energy. But doing it through mandates isn't the right way to do it. It compromises the reliability of our grid. And again, energy is the most important issue we deal with down here. You know, it really doesn't make our lit pieces too often. I'm sure it makes your lit pieces in a primary. But really, energy doesn't get the attention it should. But when we have high energy costs, it makes everything more expensive. It makes this desk more expensive. It makes your car more expensive. It makes heating your house more expensive. It is the most important issue. So when you pass policies that are going to increase energy costs, well, okay, so we talk about this could be $1,000 to $4,000 a year for a family. A lot of families, that's not a big deal. But you know, for low-income families, the people you claim to want to support and represent, that is brutal. And it's hard for them to deal with those increased costs. You know who it's not hard for? It's not hard for the 1%. Generally, it's not hard for corporations because they can just pass off the cost to us again. So when we pursue these energy policies, we should do them in a bipartisan manner. Because, you know, maybe you didn't love every amendment we had, but some of them were pretty darn good and you had some pretty weak reasons for not taking them. And I want to give you a picture of what a Republican clean energy future looks like. And if you want to have a clean, low-emission environment, the number one thing we need is nuclear. And we understand nuclear is tough to build. It's got a horrible regulatory climate, but it is a virtually carbon-free energy source, and it's stable, and it's safe. And nuclear conjures up these images of, oh, people think Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island. And When you compare that to any other energy source, fossil fuels in particular, you could attribute a whole lot of deaths, a whole lot of heart conditions, asthma, to the pollution generated by those, like coal. So rather than just take this approach where we're going to mandate it, we're going to force it down the throats of Minnesotans, well, we could encourage the development, because it is irrefutable truth, that natural gas is the leading cause of our lower emissions we've had, because it's replacing coal plants. I remember in my first term here, one of the biggest bills, I believe Representative Jim Newberger had it, to close down the Sherco plants and replace it with natural gas. That's great. We're all for closing coal plants. They're, by and large, worse energy producers in general. They may be cheap, but they're not flexible. When you have natural gas, think about natural gas in your house or natural gas on your stove. It's very adjustable. So when we build these beautiful wind turbines that generate real, cheap, beautiful energy, but that energy is not baseload, it's not consistent. Some days it's more, some days it's less. Just look at the MISO grid on your phone. Just Google MISO, you'll find it. Then the natural gas can kick on, and we're okay. Nobody dies. We have cheap and abundant energy. But then when the wind is blowing, when it's generating energy, well, then we can turn that off. And that lowers emissions, leads us to a cleaner environment. So that is what we should be focused on. Let's move away from the dirtier fossil fuels, but jettisoning all fossil fuels is a recipe for disaster, and it'll put us in the same spot as California. And that is not where Minnesotans want to be. We're very used to having nice, reliable power, and it's very important that we have reliable power because our winters are like no other state in the nation, as I know you all know. And lastly, so say that doesn't matter. You just want to push forward with this renewable energy standard. We don't even have access to the raw materials to do this. The amount of copper, lithium, cobalt, graphite, zinc, chromium, and silicone we need to increase global output if we were going to do this across the nation by over a factor of 2 for most of those, over a factor of 5 for cobalt. We don't even think there's enough lithium on the planet for this electrification build out when you talk about electric cars or building battery backups to run a renewable grid reliably. California is where they built the most batteries, and they have like over 3,000 megawatts of battery storage, and that would run LA for about 4 hours. So the current technologies we have aren't going to get us there. They physically can't. We don't even have the raw materials if we had infinite money to do so. So rather than pushing this through, putting an artificial deadline on it, we should be incentivizing smart production, not mandating this bill. It doesn't make sense. It's unaffordable. It will bring blackouts to Minnesota, which we do not need here because it's dangerous. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.